Welcome to the second launch of the Launch It podcast, where we dive into all things transportation, logistics, supply chain, and business. I'm Matt, that's Karen Deep, and that's Evan. We've been tiptoeing, we've been talking about different things. Last week we did an intro on how to get into transportation. I think this week we're going to dive into brokers versus assets. And Evan's in there, he's a big asset guy. Karen Deep's in there, he's a big broker guy. I'm a brokerage guy myself. I'm going to try to take a little bit of a sideline here. We're going to kick it off. Evan, let's hear it. Why do you think we should be using more assets as a customer versus brokerages? What's the disadvantages for brokers? Just dive in there. Tell me what you think.
Absolutely, Matt. Thank you so much. And I think the main reason why we should use assets is because obviously it has more accountability. You got, as a shipper, if you have a certain amount of lanes, well, you can break it up. If you have 10 different lanes, it's ideal to have one strong carrier on each lane as your primary. I'm not saying that one carrier can handle all the business. That's where brokers would come in. But if you have a dedicated lane, Toronto, Montreal every day, you can have a set of 2 to 3 carriers, and you know that someone's going to cover that freight no matter what. You can set up a trailer pool, tell them that, hey guys, I need 5 trailers amongst yourselves, and I need to get one loaded, and that's it. One of the 3 will get your load covered, not a problem.
Kenny, what do you think?
Strong carriers, yeah.
I agree with what he's saying, but going back to what Evan said on the one thing in terms of, where we would come in terms of, providing that coverage, right? Yeah, you could have 1 to 3, carriers set on a lane, but where the brokerage comes in is we're able to do everything, right? So cool, you have your 1 to 2 carriers on the lane, but we're able to provide coverage no matter what. And, we're able to get, volume pricing, you could say, and offer that pass along to the customer as well, right? So in terms of coverage, I don't think that's a problem. In terms of, the only thing you can say the weakness of ours is we don't have our own assets, so that's where we fall weak sometimes. But when you've built good, strong relationships with, carriers in those core lanes, then that's not an issue, right?
Well, how about and we're going to keep going with you, Karen Deep, is what about when the customer talks about there's extra fat in there? So when you talk to an asset, you get the price, it is the price. When you talk to a broker, you got the extra layer of fat when the customer's not paying the best he can be. When you hire someone like Evan, he gets the price that he ought to be getting it going straight to the carrier. When he's talking to a broker, It's inflated because the broker needs to make his money. Yep. So that translates down to us, the customer, taking some of that pain off by paying a higher price for the end product. What do you think about that?
So this kind of, I was talking to Evan about this earlier. That comes down to us, we're selling our service, but we're also selling where we come in as a value add, right? So yeah, you could say that as that markup, but that markup should be sufficed by providing enough value that, it's worth it for them to pay that extra amount that, that Evan is, undercutting us by. You could say, not undercutting, but, getting the competitive price, you could say, right?
Drop the rate, pick up the freight, man.
I was going to say, Evan, and on those terms, what do you say when a broker can find a quote unquote a cheaper rate or more cost effective rate from a different asset than your own assets? And that, I remember when I was working asset, that hurt me the most all the time. Like, how can you find something to do something cheaper when I know I'm pretty bottom price? How does that affect your business? What's your take to the customer on that?
I think the main thing you do is you always try to onboard as many as shippers, customers, or brokers as you can, so that you're not stuck with the limited amount of pool of talent or customers to work with. It goes with any industry, right? Now, if you're a carrier starting out, it's going to be hard because you have to deal with the bigger brokers and you don't have an option. But when you run a certain lane, and that's where you have to set up your business to be specific and very prevalent on certain corridors and areas, right? You can't be a carrier and say we go everywhere and we do everything. You have to be, if you're reefers, you have to be in an area where you can find backup freight and not be reliant on one broker. Let's just say, for example, Toronto to Texas is a tough corridor. If you're going to start it as a company and just try to get Texas freight, you're going to get screwed because guys are going down there for 16, 1700. But if you keep your eyes open and you say you're going to do Midwest and Southeast and things like that, you have more options. So you never get bottomed down by the broker. Does that sort of make sense to you?
Kind of, but I think you went on a little bit of a different tangent on that piece. So I was going to bring you back. So a broker hires you. Let's say your rate from Toronto to Montreal is $700, and that's a damn good price to go to Toronto on a dry load tandem. And all of a sudden, Mr. Karen Deep says, "You're expensive. I can do it for $550 all day long, but your cost is $700. How is it that he can find a carrier that can do it cheaper than you can and do it still as effectively and still service it on time? How would you handle kind of those kind of conversations?
At the end of the day, in trucking, you never see the profit as cash in your hand. It's all about keeping your assets utilized to 100% and maximizing every mile you run. Obviously, you're going to have some lanes where you go out for cheap, but that's where your backhaul has to make sense for you. If you're going out for cheap and you're coming back for a really cheap price too, you're not going to last in the market very long. A lot of carriers have a lot of good carrier base or partner base in certain areas like, Montreal or even New Brunswick, where they can have a good backhaul to make up for it. But if you're a carrier that has both ways, $1.50 freight, chances are if it's not dropping hook and you can't pay your drivers a little bit less, you're not going to be in business for too long. But if I don't have an option and I have to go at 550, I'll try to build that lane and try to get some sort of ways to save my money. Maybe a drop trailer at shipper, so I don't have to pay my city driver. I can just pick up and go direct with line haul. You would have to find innovative ways to keep your costs low, because even if you're getting good rates and the market turns, even the best of customers start reducing their rates, right?
Yes.
So efficiency and being lean is what really matters. And it's not that you should always have the lowest rate, but your cost internally should be lowest possible so that you're not worried about what market prices will do.
I guess just touching on the backhaul side of it, like brokers, you could say we don't have to really, focus about, finding a backhaul, because, we're able to, certain carriers, their head haul is one way, and then we can find another carrier for their backhaul, right? In terms of the pricing for the customer. So that's something on on their end, they're like super like, okay, we got to make sure everything matches up for us. We kind of just worry about the one way side of the trip, right? If it matches up and it's two way, that's great. That's even more beneficial for us. But yeah.
That's a good point.
I was going to even go a little bit further. One other thing that going on this topic is customers always, what I always heard was brokers are the first one to yell, I'm not getting paid enough. And that's the disadvantage of having a cheap broker where, hey, yeah, you can cover it for 550 today.
Yeah.
But an asset will cover it for 700 all year long. Mm-hmm. And in the end, who wins the most? Is it the broker or the asset? Because the asset provides that consistency. The customer knows what he's paying. He can budget. He can work around it. With the broker, as soon as that market flips, and we all know the market flips all the time, you can't do anything about it. If the truck all of a sudden you can't find that truck for 550, now it's costing you 950. There's nothing much you can do about it, right? Like you go up to an asset, and they're gonna say the same thing. But if he's committed to a customer, they're going to hold their price. How do you adjust for that? What would you say to a customer on that kind of point of view?
I guess that starts off when you initially, onboard a new customer in terms of how you price out their rates, right? It's either if a lane is kind of choppy and it's all over the place, then you kind of pitch to them, hey, let's go with the spot quoting approach and not really set certain rates, right? That way you're able to prevent, kind of give yourself insurance of if we're giving a customer $1,000 right now, but at some point of the year rates do go up to $1,500, right? At least you're not cutting yourself short that 500 when things do flip, right? If you keep it open to the spot quote side of things, right? And if let's say the customer does, they're more on the, hey, I just want a fixed rate, I don't want to, keep on going with this back and forth, right? That's when you kind of do your pricing on your end to make sure that the customer gets the rate they want, but you overall at the end of the year still are profitable with that account, right?
Great. How about in scenarios where like pricing? I always find that assets are able to price out for the customer a lot quicker, and that's usually a big thing for customers. Assets can come together, go, I know my rate, I need to do this. Brokers always have a little bit of a hard time because they're going to go through the listing. I'm going to call this guy, I'm going to call that guy, I'm going to call this guy. Do you think there's an advantage to having a wider view of the market, because brokers do have a better feel of the market, or is it better to have that niche carrier who can therefore develop that lane? So if he's running Toronto, Montreal, doesn't matter what the market is, he knows he needs that $700 and he can make it profitable every single time, while the broker's always kind of playing that market. Do you think there's an advantage to that or a disadvantage?
Advantage for the customer or on our side as a company?
Customer, from a customer's point of view. We're going to flip it a little bit.
I think there is an advantage because let's just say, sorry, are we talking spot, on a spot quote basis or fixed pricing on their end?
More of sustainability of that piece of the business. So now you're approaching it, how do I put it? You're approaching it as a customer going to the broker. Now the broker is consistently able to find that capacity, hold on to the capacity, but now I think we kind of answered that already.
No, you know what it is? So if you're trying to think about what's best for the customer, I would honestly look at So we were dealing with the plastics customer today. We thought they were a small customer, right? And no disrespect, we said, don't spend too much time on the RFP because there's gonna be a lot of cheaper guys. But when we looked at, like, we talked to them, we looked at their business, they had about 200 shipments to like the Midwest, and they had a ton of stuff going out like all over North America, right? We asked them, like, what's your total budget? Like in millions, what's your total budget? So the guy's budget was between $2 to $3 million, right? So me and the fellows did some quick math, and we said, if it's going to Alabama, Indiana, 300 shipments or whatever, it's going to be this much average per truckload. But then we broke it down into like segments. If 30% of the freight is Indiana, spot price is through $950 to Indiana, the max can go to $1,100. So we kind of worked backwards. We looked at how much to spend on freight total. And we went from there, sort of like, we know how much the rates can be and how much they can allocate towards us, right? So for example, we know we're not going to get 100% of the volume. So we have to go in with the price where we'd be able to secure maybe 20, 30, 40% of that freight. Does that sort of make sense to you? You got to see how much they're spending as a whole. And then you got to see where the prices are going to be at. So if there's 3 shipments a week to Montreal, and the summer it's going to be a bit cheaper, like say 600 times 3 is 1,800, but then in the winter it's going to go to like 800-900. So you're going to be going up to the $2,200-$2,400 of budget a week. Does that make sense? And then you could
and it kind of brings me back to where my thought was at. Now, to that, the customer that you're talking about, would he be more inclined to go to a broker now because the broker can provide the whole solution to him, and the broker can go to him be like, hey, I see you have a headache with this. I see you're constantly struggling with this. I can provide you all the carriers, and we'll do a cost plus analysis where you only have to pay me $50 a load, and everything else is just what the market's paying. Well, an asset can never really provide that kind of solution, right?
But then the customer would be like, okay, what's the point of having the broker, right? Like, I know what you mean. Like, a lot of people don't even do the cost plus, they do transaction. And it's same with brokers. They'll reduce their rates just to get the business. Like, they do $30 a load transaction, right? Now, the thing is this, if the guy says cost plus, he's like, what you're doing for me is just finding me the truck. Whereas I only have, it depends on the customer. Like, this guy has 5 lanes, mainly prevalent lanes. He can find 5 carriers to cover all those lanes all day long, year round. So for him, it doesn't make sense. But for a customer like, say, GE or like Apple, where it's just like there's 150 different lanes and the pricing is changing all the time, yes, they could utilize the broker services and say it's going to be a cost plus. Because again, it goes back to the business. It's more like they can afford to do it than they cannot, right? This customer, I know they're a medium-sized manufacturer, but they can't afford to always sort of have the 15% extra margin built in for the broker.
I'm going to lead Karen Deep here a bit and help him out with what I was trying to say without being complete on his side. Yep. Is how what was I going to say? Damn it.
Oh man, you can't cuss on the podcast.
How do you lost my train of thought again?
Well, you're going to be talking about how you can, as a broker, sustain that cost plus model year round while still adding value to the customer, right?
No, it was more along the SME side where how does a customer know all the carriers? That's where I was kind of going with it. Karen Deep being a broker will know all the carriers. How does the customer know who to go to?
Okay, I'm going to cut you up just a little bit. It's because even a smaller shipper nowadays, let's think about it now in the age of like big data and all that stuff, right? If I'm a customer even shipping 5 pallets a day, I'm going to have 5 big companies, maybe 50 smaller companies calling me every single day. And then even if I'm not that sophisticated, I'll come up with a spreadsheet or even a piece of paper. Like what's ABC's rate, what's DEF's rate and stuff like that. I'll come up with the list of those carriers. And then what happens is when I know I'm only moving product on one lane, I go like, okay, here's my rate. I'm going to call this guy every time. That's why smaller customers, they tend to be more loyal because they know they have that one fixed cost with the carrier. And if it's multiple lanes, say 10 lanes, even a small shipper would be able to figure out like, okay, I'm going to get my admin person to just be like, okay, split this lane up and have these 10 carriers coming in. That's all. Because we have some smaller customers too as an asset-based carrier, and they have some big carriers and smaller carriers, but they always go with the same sort of trucks. And if the truck says no, then they just ask 1 or 2 of the other guys. And everybody is dynamic enough into this environment that they would be willing to go to a new area for the customer so that they can secure that guy's lane also. Does that make sense?
It does. Karen, what do you think?
I agree with what he's saying, but we had an incident yesterday where, there was a customer that there was like another carrier, well-known, carrier across Canada, and they had never heard of them, right? So I agree with that.
Yeah.
I agree with what I've been saying, but in terms of, them, jotting down carriers that, that you run the lane and stuff, but there's still, shippers. I don't know if yesterday's incident was a one-off, but a lot of us were surprised about like that carrier runs this like lane primarily, and
Yeah.
like, this shipper had no clue about this carrier
Maybe the
existing,
carrier's
right?
outreach is just so weak because they're a big carrier, right? They're a mega carrier, so they probably don't even go to this customer because they have too much freight on that lane, and they think it's probably a waste of time to sort of.
I think a lot of that has to do with branding as well. A lot of people, and I've talked to a lot of customers, they don't know who to go to for what issue. That's why they go to a broker, because I don't know who to talk to. I look up a 3PL, and these guys seem like they know what they're doing. They're big enough name brand, and that's why they go to a bigger asset-based logistics.
How do you know who the right brokers, right? Like that's actually an interesting topic. It could be an episode on its own, a segment on its own. How do you choose the right carrier or the right broker, right?
We can segue right into that now. Like we got 5 minutes. I mean,
like how do you choose the right broker? If we're a transportation manager with millions of dollars of budget, we can choose asset or broker, whatever, right? How do we we know we can automate some lanes with asset-based carriers because they'll take them, but how do we find those right brokers to sort of cater to our needs and stuff? Because everyone's going to go and post it on the load boards. That's what everybody's doing. Nobody's doing anything innovative, and that's another segment we could go into. What is the modern day broker doing different? I know there's technology, but what technology are you talking about? It's either LoadLink or it's DAT. There's nothing revolutionary between a smaller broker and C.H. Robinson type of thing, right? Data management, yes, but at the end of the day, the process is the same. Myself as a customer, I'd rather just go to the guy who takes my call all the time.
And that goes back to what I was saying earlier in terms of value add, right?
Service, yeah.
Because essentially what I've been saying, it's, transportation, you could say at the end of the day has become, or is a commodity, right? Most shippers just go and check for the lowest rate, they are here, take it type of thing, right? But it comes back in terms of what value you're actually providing to that customer, right? Earlier we got a call today, and, we didn't even pitch it to him. It's just like we're having a general conversation about, figuring out what his struggles are and, catering a solution towards that, right? And, he even said himself, man, he's like, I don't mind paying up as long as, certain aspects of my business is taken care of and is being well done, right? So yeah, you could say it is a commodity, but there are people still willing to pay to make sure that everything is streamlined as well taken care of, right? Because at the end of the day, when they have service failures, that comes back to them, and they just want to make sure that their stuff is well taken care of, right?
I think you're right. That's a big point there on commodity. If you treat yourself like a commodity, you're going to become a commodity. Like look at oil manufacturers or producers, right? A lot of them have started refining their own product because, if they're just a commodity selling, they're not going to last in business too long. But a lot of them have started to make plastics and, polyester sort of products and just evolve from there, right? So that's what it is. Us as a transportation provider, whether asset or broker, we just treat ourselves as like, hey, my rate's going to be the lowest. But if you give them service, like I'm going to be able to do this for you, and I can automate this segment of the business for you. And once that's done, we can move to the warehousing, then we can move to the international shipments, right? That's how you sort of bring that value together. A lot of people don't talk about that. Everybody just jumps to have this many trucks and trailers.
How can a carrier add more value to a customer? Or a broker. Like what can you, besides price and consistency and on-time performance all the time, what else can you do?
So we actually have these notes fresh. So we talked to the guy and we decided what his problem was. It wasn't that trucks were showing up on time or leaving, too late. There's something simple as a shunting program in the yard, because they were it's a business analysis, right? They had the loading guy who doesn't even have a license to go into the yard, pick up a shunt truck and shunt trailers back and forth. So that means the production is behind. When the production is behind, all the carriers that are waiting in line, they're charging a waiting time, and their warehouse space is clogged. So now the guy thinks he needs a multi-million-dollar warehouse. We told him $55 an hour. We'll make sure you never have warehousing problems again. Does that sort of explain a little bit about where the value add is? Because you're looking at it as business and you're a consultant, you're solving the problem. You're not just moving the product. The product, if somebody's reaching out to you to help, that needs help, is because they're having a problem with their other areas of the business, not just shipping. Nobody has just shipping problems. Shipping problems arise from bad habits, production-wise and forecasting.
And on top of that, it's just, a good thing we said, Tim, is like, we're not worried about the next 1-2 weeks. We're worried about the next 2-3 years.
Yes.
Right? So we question things like how do you plan on managing when e-logs come in and so that sort of stuff, right? So kind of just not worrying about the now in terms of what's happening, like worrying about the next 2 or 3 years. That's where I guess you can work together and build the value add.
And he was surprised because he said we were like, I don't know, like the 12th to 13th call. Even though we have their business right now, it's a management change in their company. It's a medium-sized company, and they said nobody's asked us that question. The bigger companies just come here and go like, how much volume can you allocate to us? They don't ask anything. The smaller companies go like, what price can you give us? So the big guys ask for volume, the small guys ask for price, sort of thing, right? They battle on that. Whereas we were just like, okay, we don't care if you get your business or not. How do we ensure that you're in business for the next 2 years so that we can come back with bigger and more badder sort of, services for you, that we can make more money off you in the end, right? Not right now, but in the end, How you get to the end is making sure you survive those 2 years, because when e-logs come in, this Canadian shipper would have more difficulties moving their product domestically, even if they had intermodal, because the lead times wouldn't be there.
And I think that's a great point, because I think a lot of people don't have that forethought to solve that problem for somebody. Similarly, back in February, March, when COVID was starting to happen, I was having these conversations with the customer. I'm going, "What are you guys doing about COVID?" They're like, "Well, it's not a big deal." I'm like, "No, not today. It's going to be a big deal in a few weeks." And they're going, "No, I don't think so. It's going to pass." I'm like, "Listen, we've already started doing things differently. We're going to work from home. We're going to do this. We're going to minimize our amount of things that we're going to be doing. We want to do the same thing when we're touching you as a customer. We want you guys to think about that." And they were surprised. And recently, they were just taking it more seriously, and they reached out to us because they had a big problem now. They have to clear out a whole warehouse. They're going, "Hey, can you help us?" We said, "Absolutely no problem." And they're going, "You guys are the only ones that actually are always asking to, what can we do to help, not what we're getting paid next." It's like, "Hey, can you want to use our warehouse for something? Hey, do you want to do this? Do you want to do that?" And it's never like, "Hey, you can use my warehouse for a cost." It's always like, "Hey, you can use it because there's a systematic problem here. We want to help you solve it, and we know that it's a cost of doing business. So we'll make it out in the end." And I think customers look for that from either an asset or a broker. I think in the end, both are justifiable and both are much needed. I don't think you should ever put all your eggs in one basket as a customer. But I think you should always definitely spread it out, especially even if you have 1 lane, 2 lanes, or 3 lanes. You should always be checking the market too. Don't give it to just one guy. And as a carrier, I always do that too. I used to say, "Hey, check out the market. I might be a little bit higher, I might be a little bit lower, but at least I'm going to be honest, and I know the price is adjusting. And I'll tell them if the price is going one way, I'm going to dip my price a little bit for you because I know the market's adjusted a little bit down. Or if the market went up, it's the same conversation I want to have with them. Like, hey, I'm struggling with this because our inbound sucks now. Let's talk about our price." And good customers, just as there's bad carriers and bad brokers, there's bad customers. Some customers are like, "I don't care." Good ones, good partners will sit down and work out a solution with you and make you successful as well and grow with you. That's what good brokers do as well, and good carriers, right?
At the end of the day, we all need each other, right?
Exactly.
You could say it's a three-legged stool, where there's customers, carriers, and brokers, right? So we need to help each other and to grow overall, right?
Absolutely. Well, that's the 20-minute mark. We're going to try to keep them as quick as possible. So, thanks everybody for joining us today, whoever is watching today, and hopefully we'll have more questions and more ideas and more in-depth conversations as we go on in continuing weeks.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Sayonara.